It's day 23, and the Mo is, as yourself, it's growing along. Uh,
Hello and welcome to another Live at 5, a Movember special Live at 5. It is the 23rd today, which means that there is literally 7 days left of Mo growth to go and fundraising to do. So don't forget, if you are joining us, that there are plenty of links below and attached to this live as well that you can use to make sure that you donate to Movember. What a great cause. Last week we had Owen on, and Owen talked about his journey with testicular cancer and going through chemo at the minute. I still have another chat to bring you from Adrian, who is living with prostate cancer, which is amazing. But today I'm really excited to have Ross, a fellow Movember ambassador, is going to be joining us to talk all about his experience with Movember and with mental health. So I am going to bring Ross in straight away. How are you, Ross?
Hi, David. How are you?
How's it going? Thank you so much for doing this. It's really cool to chat with you and connect with you
No problem.
on this.
Absolutely. It's strange, isn't it, when you've got these kind of Instagram friends and then all of a sudden you're talking to them in real life. It's like, oh wow, it's a real person. How bizarre.
That is the majority of my network on Coaching the Man, apart from the people who follow me from my personal site, is like just people that you've just reached out to, had a connection with, and spoken about. And you've been really well spokenly about your own struggles with mental health. But I wanted to, because you're an 8-time Movember advocate. So when did you first get into Movember?
Just on the outset, by the way, thanks for having me on. Glad to talk about things. It's day 23, and the Mo is, as yourself, it's growing along. And it's also day 23 of the swims, which is, I'm sure we'll get into at some stage, which is, it's been a good experience, but at the same time, I'm getting tired. I can't wait to not wake up at 6 in the morning again and have to go to the 40 foot, but totally worth it.
The days are getting colder for sure anyway.
Yeah, that's for sure. We reached a weird point now where the air temperature is often warmer than the sea temperature. So actually, it feels like a swimming pool or a sauna getting into the cold sea. So it's my 8th campaign. So I started 8 years ago. The reason why I got involved in Movember is pretty easy. I was a rugby guy. I kind of grew up around the sport. And the Antipodeans, the Australians and New Zealanders, used to come up every November to play Ireland and England and stuff, and they'd all be sporting Mo's, and I just thought it was quite cool. So I was curious, kind of got involved in it from that side, and I had kind of bit part campaigns for years where I raised a couple of €100, but I never really took it very seriously. And then last year I had a very serious campaign, and this year I'm now an ambassador. So that's where I'm at.
It's so cool. Like, I mean, of course, the swims as well, but also you were part of something that you didn't even realize you needed until you needed it, which is really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these kind of old age adages that we're inherently communal beings, and I think we're moving into a kind of a strange world where we're living in a less communal world. Look at Facebook now changing their name to Meta, and what they want is to people live on this like online world where you don't go out, and all of a sudden it's like the Matrix. We're plugged into these pods and we're not talking to people. And I kind of went through my own mental health issues last year, sort of, from I suppose a series of unfortunate events, and I found myself swimming every day on the suggestion of my brother. When I was kind of at my lowest point, he said, why don't you go every day for Movember? And at first I thought the idea was terrible. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Sounds stupid. I just want to lie in my room and sulk all day. But I started swimming every morning at the same time, at the same place in Howth, at this beautiful place called Balscaddon Beach. If anybody's watching has never swam out there, it's incredible. And I just connected with these people that were swimming every day. And it was great. And all of a sudden I had this community of like-minded people around me, and they were supportive and positive, and it really helped me through my own struggles. And that's why, for me, that kind of community that gets evolved around Movember, the conversations that you have, it's fantastic. It really is. And I've seen it firsthand. And now this year I'm seeing it firsthand with others. Like people have been reaching out to me. They've been coming down to my swims, all of these incredible things. And that's a beautiful thing, this kind of idea of community and the conversations that occur around those communities.
It is. And you know, watching your videos and your posts every day, and certainly seeing it last year firsthand in Ireland, the sea swimming just kind of exploded because I suppose there was a lot of people who hadn't really got anything else to do. So they just took it and ran with it, really. But seeing the amount of people show up every day, all for just one goal to just push the boundaries of their own physical being, but also at the same time raising awareness for talking about your mental health. Was it whilst you were there last year doing it that you realized that you had the language to be able to explain what was going on inside?
Yeah, so like, I mean, that's a really good question. So I've been through kind of two periods of, I would say, depression, I guess. The first one was in sort of 2018, where things in work hadn't been going well, and sort of a lot of things around me had led me into this circumstance where I decided to start seeing a therapist and a counselor to try and figure out what was going on in my own head. And I fully admit that I would have been one of those males that would have been very stoic and just been like, no, I can deal with it myself. Fuck that. I don't need any help. And so in that period, I had kind of been introduced to the idea of therapy first, and how to talk about my feelings, how to understand what was going on inside my own head, and how to open up to them. And that was a hugely important thing for me. It allowed me obviously develop personally, it allowed me develop emotionally. It kind of affected my relationships for the better with people. But the second time around was a lot worse. You know, like I just essentially gone through a period where, you know, in a nutshell, I'd kind of lost my high flying job in London. I'd gone traveling around the world, and that ended after 10 days because of COVID. I ended up back in Ireland in the room I grew up in as a child, you know, with nothing to do during lockdown. My girlfriend of 2 years left me. And so in any one kind of normal scenario, you might be able to deal with the job loss, a breakup, the loss of a dream in one go. But when they all happen at once, it can spiral very, very quickly. And I got really, really sick when that all happened. It all accumulated October 2020 with the breakup of the relationship. And you know, I suffered severe anxiety. I was put on medicine for that. I suffered insomnia. I couldn't sleep for days. I couldn't eat. I lost 10 kilos of weight in the space of 7 or 8 days. And, you know, was in this kind of spiral that it seemed like everything was going against me. I wasn't sure where I was going to end up or how it was ever going to get better. And you start thinking some pretty bad thoughts. I had a breakdown in front of my father one day where I just started shaking uncontrollably and crying. And I remember my dad, he was quite stressed because he'd never really seen his son in that kind of capacity before. Yeah. And then another day, I essentially punched the mirror, you know, and I kind of cut my hand open and stuff. And I would have never been somebody like that, but I did it because I felt like self-harming, I guess, you know, just something to change what was going on in my head, the monotony of it all, the lockdown, getting up every day, the fucking constant stress about all the losses I had had and all the rejection and all these kind of things. And so once the kind of physical effects, and I went on kind of medicine to get over the initial effects. It was anti-anxiety pills, sleeping pills. Once that happened, I obviously started seeing a therapist again. And that's where sort of the tools I'd learned about trying to come back and understand my feelings and deal with them started to help a lot more. And that's where the conversations came in. Honestly, it was the third day I went swimming. I didn't intend it. I went November 1st, November 2nd. And then November 3rd, I was on the beach in Balscaden, and there's a guy called Carl Swan. I don't know if he's logged on, but I'm sure maybe he'll see it later. Super inspirational guy, like mid 40s, divorced, like lost a family business. So kind of had gone through his own issues. And he was just getting changed beside me on the beach. And I'd kind of known him from like being around Howth, and he just like, he could see it in my eyes. He was just like, are you all right, dude? And he just started having these conversations with me. And because I'd been through therapy and I kind of known how to speak to people like that, we just latched onto each other. And before we know it, we were swimming every day. There's a little community around us. We're going for coffees. We're going for runs around Howth Hill. So it was not just physical. It was not just mental. It was also physical. And so that was really wonderful.
Yeah. It's amazing that this physicality straightens you out and gives you the ability to see, oh, actually, I have got it in me to feel good. And I suppose the swimming and the running makes sense. It's always really interesting to hear how people manage to figure out that, oh, this is not me. Like, I am not this person. And you talk about like just like having like the shakes, the anxiety. That's how my anxiety shows up for me. Like it shows up kind of almost, you need to deal with this, and that's how it comes about. But like the becoming quite violent and stuff, trying to get this whatever feeling is out of you, is something that some people won't even recognize in themselves until they find out that through therapy, if they're lucky enough to get that far,
Yeah.
and figure it out, that, you know, you can fix this, and it's not just who you are. It doesn't have to be you.
Yeah, I think the two things that you said there are quite true. I think the first thing, which is incredible, is anybody who's never really suffered like severe anxiety, is that it's amazing how much the mind controls the body. Like I had stopped drinking at that stage. Like I was going out for a walk every day. So there was nothing really, like, it's not like I was taking loads of drugs or drinking a lot, that my body was kind of, it had a reason to react this way. But all of a sudden my brain was like, no, dude, this is the way your body's going to react. And that was the first time I had really seen the power of the mind's physical connection in a way. The second thing is, I agree with you completely. The reason why the physical side of me wanting to do things like this, hit things and, get angry, was more to do with how angry I was at the situation, how I felt I couldn't affect it. I'd had a life where, for most part, I was able to control my environment. I was pretty fortunate with jobs and relationships and all these kind of things. And then all of a sudden it was all taken out of my control. And I think a lot of people don't realize that control is a big factor that everybody likes, because control is no risk. You feel like you have some sort of element of what's going on, the control around your life. And for most of us, over the 18 months of the pandemic, for the first time in our lives, we lost control of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Couldn't go to work, couldn't socialize, literally couldn't go more than 2 kilometers from your home. And that's where my anger came from.
The only thing you could control was your body, and you weren't in control of that, which is even more frustrating.
And just nothing, yeah. And so actually I read a really wonderful book that I'd highly recommend anybody who watches, or yourself, to read, and maybe you have. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. It's written by a guy called Vicktor Frankel. I don't know if you've read it. And that really carried me through the period, because, Vicktor Frankel was this guy who was in a Nazi concentration camp, and he was able to, keep his head in a kind of a mind space that allowed him to avoid the worst mental realities. And there's one line that always just sticks out to me, which is, when we're no longer able to change a situation, we're confronted to change ourselves. And that, like, once I read that book, I was just kind of hit with this wave, being like, whoa, all right, let's stop worrying about all these things that were going on around me. All I can do is control how I react to them. And honestly, like a light switch, I just had this kind of mental revelation. And obviously that coincided with the Movember swims and sort of the positivity that came out of that. And that's what ultimately started to pull me out of where I was. So.
Yeah. I have that book, like, it's literally just there next to my bed, and I have an awful habit of highlighting things in books that have those epiphany moments.
I do the same.
Sure, when you said that line, I was like, I've read that a couple of times, so I must have it highlighted.
Yeah, it's such a great quote to live by. Honestly, when you can't change a situation, you're confronted to change yourself, and that's the hardest part for most of us, is that we're too stubborn to change the way we think about things. And I reckon that, the Ross a year and a half ago, or 14 months ago, that went into that circumstance, is a completely different Ross now. Like, I feel much more enlightened. I feel much more in tune with myself, and it affects my relationships with people around me, because I'm much more calm and much more understanding and empathetic of what other people are up to in their lives, and about what my role is. Before, I would have been like a pretty young, not arrogant, but like maybe slightly overconfident person who just never really considered how my reactions in the world would affect other people. And the whole thing has just made me change the way I see the world. And ultimately, I feel so much happier. I feel so much more content in life. And it's really given me these tools to kind of be able to deal with these issues straight up. Like right now, I'm going through hell in work. You have no idea. I've worked until midnight the last couple of nights. We have a big trial. I'm a solicitor. We have a big trial starting on Thursday. And all my colleagues around me are just like, how are you so calm? And I'm just like, because guys, we can deal with all this. It's not the worst thing. Just, focus on the way you interpret what's going on around you, and do it with a smile. And if Vicktor Frankel can have a smile in a concentration camp, I think I can have a smile during busy hours of work. So.
Yeah. And I think what's great is, I think in this moment, especially with Movember, like a second year through a pandemic, there are going to be a lot of people that may not have got to the point where they've figured out their mental health just yet. And I think with a lot of people now realizing that they are going into isolation and they're the only ones in their household or their family, and they're isolated to a room, I think people are really struggling with their mental health for that reason. And you've managed to get yourself to a point where you're now content. And I love that word, because happiness is great, but I think seeking contentness is so powerful. And that you've got this amazing foundation that whatever happens in your day, you start with a swim, you start with all of that good stuff, that anything really can only take you back down to that raw bottom. It's really powerful. I want to ask you, you said about you being a different Ross to a year ago. Are you proud of what you've achieved?
Yeah, massively. Like really, like again, up until this sort of last year, I would have been the Ross that focused on sort of these external material achievements, job, sports, music, whatever it might be. And I realized that none of that was really as important as the development that I've gone through over the last year. So yeah, I'm super proud. I wish I could actually go back and tell Ross of 3 years ago, to think this way a lot earlier, because I think, it just would have made life a lot easier. I would have had more meaningful relationships with people, I think. I would have been closer to my friends because I'm so much more akin to now reaching out to people more often. Even the other night when Taoiseach Micheál Martin, announced sort of these small restrictions, okay, midnight closing and stuff. But I was really enjoying socializing after a year and a half. I'd been out most weekends until 2 or 3 in the morning, and it was great. And even I, when you got that bit of news, I was like, oh, really, like, why are we doing this again? And so straight away I was like, okay, look, there's no point in getting upset about this. You can't control it. Focus on what you can do. And I just started reaching out to all my friends. I was just like, hey guys, how are you feeling about the restrictions? And most people would say, yeah, I'm fine. But even like a little bit of people being like frustration, it's just after a year and a half, more negative news. It has a big psych on all of our minds. So yeah, the new Ross, he reaches out more. He asks his friends a lot about his mental health. He even asks his dad about his mental health, which is probably a question my dad never got from any of his friends. But whenever I go for a walk with him now, which I did last week, I said to him, how are things up top? What's stressing you out? How are you feeling about things? And it's amazing. He just opened up straight to me and had these great conversations about his relationships and his work and how he felt. And that just would have never happened before if I hadn't have experienced what I did sort of over the last 12 months, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. And I think especially with being able to get to Movember, I've sat down with a load of people recently, and there was this guy and he had a mustache, and I went, do you mind me asking if you're growing that like on purpose, or is that something you always do? And we ended up having a conversation about Movember, and people's motivations for Movember is always really, really interesting and inspiring. And I think those like notifications about the new restrictions and stuff, they hit really hard to so many people. The most level-headed person will have just instantly been triggered, whether it was anger or sadness or frustration. And I think it is really cool that like you had the awareness to reach out to all of your friends based on your experience, because some people haven't gone through that in order to even know that announcement made them act in that way. And to be able to make that connection is really powerful for you as a person.
I think you were saying to me that you had a little spike in anxiety after listening to it as well. I think it happens to everybody. You know what I mean? So
I was so anxious.
Yeah. So was I. I was sitting there being like, okay, here we go again. Where's this going to end? And when is it going to end? And sort of this kind of this tiresome monotony of the whole thing can really affect people. So yeah, and it's so simple. It's so simple to just be like, hey, how are you doing, man? Like, what's going on today? How are you feeling? Like, one of my closest friends, Ty Walsh Pilo, he's living out in Canada at the moment, and he's kind of a bit isolated out there. Oh, sorry, not in Canada, in the States, but he was in Canada for a couple of weeks. And, we have these great catch-ups like pretty often. And the catch-ups are always like, how are you doing mentally? And it's lovely. And I think it's becoming so much more normalized about like just reaching out to your mate, showing them a bit of love. Women do it all the time. They're so much more akin to it. But I think men are getting much better at it. How are you doing, bro? Like, what's going on in your head? Are you feeling all right? And that's a beautiful thing, man. Beautiful thing.
It's so simple. Do you know why? Because I'm going to let you go because I know you've got loads of work to do, but I think that's a really great place to leave it, because so many times you'll be walking down the street and somebody will remind you of somebody that you know. And I think it's your duty then to go, I'm going to just reach out and say hi, or I'm just going to ask them. Like I was the other week, we were chatting. I was like, I'm just going to ask Ross if he's interested in jumping on and having the chat. And I was like, well, I can only ask him, and he, if he's not available, he'll say no. But we just have to follow that intuition that we have as human beings. But thank you so much for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry it had to be so short, but it was lovely. It was lovely talking to you. And yeah, I'll just say that like to anybody that is watching, like get involved in Movember. It's a great organization for any men out there. Like I've had lots of people reach out to me over the course of my month with my swims, and we had like 20 people down most weekends, which is lovely. We have this little community of people, but just be encouraged to do anything. Like, speak to like-minded people, go down to your local club, go to the movie theater, go to your art gallery, whatever it might be, and form communities. They're brilliant because those support communities, like ultimately that's what helps us through the world. we're living, like I said, in this increasingly isolated world where we're constantly on our phone and we're looking down. And for me, the real power of, helping mental health is community. It's the people around you. It's so important. And Movember is the perfect organization to do that for men in particular. Check it out. There's even such rudimentary things as, Movember conversations, like how to have a conversation with your bro, a difficult one. There's the ALEC method, ask, listen, encourage action, follow up, basically check in. I had another close friend of mine who had some issues the other week, and he cried down the phone to me because he's unsure where he is in his life. And I just even went through those steps in my head. And, once he had the cry out, he even said to me, I feel so much better now. So it's super important. Check in on your family, check in on your friends, check in on your bros, check in on David Caulfield.
I promise you I'll come and we'll do a sea swim some point. It won't be in November because I'm definitely not in Ireland until December, but we'll do it one day. I promise.
We'll get it in one day. I'll hold you to that now, David.
Okay, I've said it on this now. It has to happen.
It's official. Everybody, all 6 or 7 people, whoever's watching, it's official now. We can hold David. That's enough witnesses, as a lawyer would say. That's enough witnesses to stand up in court. So.
Thank you so much, mate. I don't know how you get out of here, but you can.
I have no idea. I'll just press X in the corner and go back to my office. As you can see, I'm here right now disastrously, but that's all right.
Thank you so much. You're amazing.
Take care, David. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye, buddy. Thank you so much. Ross Galvin joining me, talking all things Movember, and we were talking a lot about mental health and checking in with your MoBros and checking in with your family, your friends, whoever they are around you. Check in with them, see how they're getting on, and don't be afraid to ask the question, how are you doing? Tell me what's going. Ross said something really interesting there. He was like, tell me what's going on up top. We always ask about how people are doing if they've had an injury. Certainly I know that from when I went through testicular cancer. People are asking you, how are you getting on? How's the health? How's your body? But, it's really important that we think about, how are you coping with it? How are you doing? A few friends this week I spoke to are isolating, as I said there when I was talking to Ross, isolating away from their families. It's really, really difficult, especially now. The dark nights are bad enough without having to isolate from all of the people you love because of COVID, especially when not everybody has to isolate. It's even harder for them people. So reach out to people, check in with them, make sure they're okay, and be kind to yourself, be kind to your mind. And if you do need to talk, you can always reach out to me here at Coaching the Man, or like Ross said, reach out to him. Head down, even if you don't want to go for a swim, head down on a Saturday morning, see the guys all doing it. It's inspiration. It will lift you up. It will make you feel better. It will keep you well, and it will put you in touch with maybe somebody that will inspire you one day to go on and do something just like Ross did, which become an ambassador for Movember and raise all that money and become really in tune with who you are as a person. And like he said as well, we're all looking down so much at our phones and stuff. Let's look up, let's make eye contact, let's connect with people and look after ourselves. So that's another Live at 5 for another week. I've got one more coming up next week on next Tuesday. And I have another chat bringing you a pre-recorded chat with Adrian, as I said at the top of the live, who is living with prostate cancer. So keep an eye out for that. All of the lives are available on YouTube by the end of the week. I will do it as quickly as I can, and on the Facebook page as well, which is under the same name, Coaching the Man. You look after yourself. Have a great Tuesday, and I will see you soon.